For 7 centuries, the ancient Caledonian forest of Scotland was essentially a museum of itself. It was a place where old trees stood like statues, but nothing new was happening. The ground was covered in a thick, suffocating carpet of bracken and ancient moss that acted like a plastic sheet, preventing a single new seed from touching the soil. The forest was technically alive, but it was locked. It had lost its heartbeat. But then, a group of bold conservationists decided to do something that many locals thought was reckless. They brought back 18 wild boars, animals that hadn't walked these woods since the 1300s. They released them into a massive enclosed area of the Highlands, hoping for a bit of change. What they got instead was a total biological overhaul. Within months, those 18 boars did something that hundreds of human volunteers with shovels couldn't achieve in decades. They unlocked the forest. They didn't just live in the woods, they redesigned them from the root up. The forest changed so completely that scientists are calling it a biological Big Bang. Today we are going deep into the heart of the Scottish Highlands to see how 18 furry tanks with tusks managed to revive a lost world, and why the ground beneath their feet is now the most exciting place in European ecology. To understand why this is such a big deal, you have to realize that Scotland's forests have been in a stasis for 700 years. Without large rooting animals, the forest floor becomes a dead zone for new growth. Bracken, a type of large fern, grows so thick that it shades out everything else. Below that bracken is a layer of thatch, old, decaying plant matter that never gets broken down. In a healthy forest, you need disturbance. You need something to tear up the ground, mix the soil, and create nurseries for new trees. Without the wild boar, Scotland's forests were essentially one-generation ecosystems. The old trees were there, but there were no children to take their place. The 18 boars changed that the moment their hooves hit the mud. The first thing the researchers noticed was the tilling effect. Wild boars are nature's most effective rototillers. They have incredibly strong snouts and neck muscles designed for one thing: rooting. They stick their noses into the earth and flip over huge chunks of soil looking for roots, bulbs, and insects. In the first year alone, those 18 boars turned over thousands of square meters of previously locked earth. By breaking through that thick layer of bracken and thatch, they exposed the raw soil. To a human observer, it looked like a mess, like a construction site, but to a Scots pine seed or a birch seed, it looked like a gold mine. For the first time in 700 years, seeds falling from the canopy actually had a place to land and grow. The shock to the system was immediate. In the areas where the boars had been rooting, the number of new tree seedlings skyrocketed. We aren't talking about a 5 or 10% increase. In some plots, researchers found 300% more new growth compared to areas where the boars weren't allowed. The boars were creating microhabitats. Each hole they dug became a tiny basin that collected rainwater, trapped blowing seeds, and provided shelter from the harsh highland winds. They were essentially planting the next generation of the forest for free. This is what ecologists call ecosystem engineering. The boars aren't just eating, they are building the foundation for everything else to live on. But it wasn't just the trees. The chemical transformation of the soil was insane. Scotland's highland soil is often very acidic and stratified, meaning all the nutrients are trapped in layers that plants can't easily reach. When the boars root, they perform vertical mixing. They bring the nutrient-rich minerals from the bottom up to the top and bury the decaying organic matter from the top down into the bottom. This erodates the soil, allowing oxygen to reach the deep-dwelling fungi and bacteria that are essential for forest health. The scientists found that the microbial diversity in boar-tilled soil was nearly double that of untouched ground. The boars were recharging the Earth's battery. Then came the insect explosion. Because the boars were exposing soil and stirring up decaying wood, they created a massive buffet for birds. Species like the capercaillie, a huge, rare woodland grouse, began to flock to the boar-disturbed areas. Why? Because the open soil created by the boars is where insects like to lay their eggs. For the young grouse chicks, these insects are a high-protein survival food. For 7 centuries, these birds had struggled because the forest floor was too dense and clean. The boars made it messy again. And in nature, messy means productive. The mess was actually a lifeline for some of Scotland's most endangered species. One of the most surprising parts of the data was the fungal network. As many of you know, trees communicate and share nutrients through an underground network of fungi called mycorrhizae. In the stagnant Scottish forests, these fungal networks were becoming lazy and uniform. But the physical disturbance of the boars rooting around the roots of the trees actually pruned the fungal filaments. Much like pruning a rose bush makes it grow back stronger, the boars were stimulating the underground communication network. The trees in the boar areas started showing signs of better nutrient uptake and increased resistance to disease. The boars were essentially upgrading the forest's internet. We also have to talk about the bluebell phenomenon. One of the most iconic sights in a British forest is a carpet of bluebells. But bluebells need a very specific type of soil disturbance to spread their bulbs effectively. In the locked forests, the bluebells were being squeezed out by the aggressive bracken. But the boars love to eat the starchy roots of the bracken, which penalizes the invasive plant and rewards the bluebells. Within 3 years of the release, the floor of the enclosure was transformed from a monotonous green sea of ferns into a vibrant, multicolored tapestry of wildflowers. The boars were gardening on a massive scale. Now, let's address the genetic legacy of these 18 animals. The researchers didn't just pick any boars. They looked for animals that carried the ancestral markers of the European wild boar, rather than domestic escapees. This is crucial because true wild boars have a specific foraging rhythm. They move in sounders, small family groups, and they have a very specific metabolic signature that affects what they leave behind in their waste. Their biology is tuned to the temperate forest. By releasing this specific genetic line, the project ensured that the interaction between the animal and the soil was as authentic as possible. These 18 founders started a lineage that is now perfectly adapted to the Scottish climate, growing thicker coats and larger frames than their cousins in warmer parts of Europe. The carbon question was another area where the boars provided a shocking answer. Usually when you disturb soil, people worry about releasing carbon into the atmosphere. But the Scottish study found that the secondary effect of the boars, the massive explosion of new tree growth, far outweighed the initial carbon release. By resetting the forest's growth cycle, the boars were actually turning the woodland into a much more efficient carbon sink. A young, rapidly growing forest captures much more carbon than an old, stagnant one. Those 18 boars were effectively accelerating Scotland's fight against climate change by making the land work harder. The local community's reaction was a journey in itself. At first, there was a lot of tension. People were worried about the boars' reputation for being feisty. But as the fence line tours began and people saw the transformation with their own eyes, the narrative shifted. They saw the butterfly effect in action. More boars meant more insects, which meant more birds, which meant more tourists and wildlife enthusiasts coming to the area. The boar economy started to look a lot better than the stagnant forest economy. The 18 boars became local celebrities, and they proved that we can coexist with wilder nature if we understand the value they bring to the landscape. One of the most fascinating scientific discoveries was the wood pasture effect. Scotland used to have a habitat called wood pasture, a mix of open grassland and scattered ancient trees. This is one of the most biodiverse habitats in the world, but it almost entirely disappeared because there were no large animals to keep the grass tree balance. The boars, by patchworking the forest, creating small clearings and then moving on, were recreating wood pasture in real time. They were creating edges. In ecology, the edge where the forest meets the clearing is where 90% of the action happens. The boars were maximizing the edges. The hydrology of the forest also changed insanely. Because the soil was no longer compacted and caked, it started acting like a filter. When heavy rains hit the highlands, the boar-tilled areas absorbed the water like a sphagnum sponge. This slowed down the runoff into the local streams and rivers, which reduced erosion and created better spawning beds for Atlantic salmon. Just like the Sea Eagle project in Norway, the project in Scotland proved that everything is connected. A boar rooting in the mud in the middle of a forest is somehow making the water cleaner for a fish miles away in a river. This cross-ecosystem impact is what makes big nature projects so mind-blowing. The researchers also noted a change in the physical structure of the new trees. Because the seedlings were growing in disturbed soil, they were developing stronger root systems than trees grown in nursery pots and then planted by humans. The boar-planted trees had to fight for their space from day one, which resulted in higher wood density and better wind resistance. The forest was essentially self-selecting for the strongest individuals. The 18 boars were the quality control agents for the future of Scotland's greenery. Let's talk about the seed dispersal. Boars have thick, bristly fur. As they move through different parts of the forest, They pick up seeds and spores in their coats. They then transport these seeds over miles and deposit them as they rub against trees or wallow in the mud. For many plants, the Boar Express is the only way to move between isolated patches of forest. Without the boars, these plants were inbreeding and losing genetic fitness. The 18 boars were the genetic couriers that linked disconnected parts of the highland wilderness. The wallow effect was the final piece of the puzzle. Boars love to create wallows, muddy pools where they cool off and protect their skin. These wallows might look like mud pits to us, but to a highland dragonfly or a great crested newt, they are prime real estate. These ephemeral pools stay wet even during dry spells because the boars puddle the clay at the bottom with their weight, making it waterproof. The boars were essentially building dams and ponds that supported an entire wetland community inside the dry forest. This increased complexity is exactly what a healthy ecosystem needs to survive environmental stress. As the project enters its second decade, the data is undeniable. The 18-founder experiment has proven that you don't need a massive herd to change a landscape. You just need the right animal at the right time. The Scottish Highlands are on a new trajectory because of these boars. We are seeing a forest that is dynamic, unpredictable, and vibrant. It is no longer a photo of the past. It is a video of the future. The success in Scotland has sparked interest across the globe. From the eastern steppes of Europe to the Appalachians in America, scientists are looking at the Scottish boar model. They are realizing that human management is often too tidy. We try to make nature perfect, but nature needs chaos. It needs the rooting, the wallowings, and the mess that only a wild animal can provide. The 18 boars brought back the creative chaos that had been missing for 700 years. If you ever get a chance to visit these rewilded parts of the highlands, don't just look at the trees. Look at the ground. Look for the tilled earth, the wallows, and the wildflower carpets. That is the fingerprint of a resurrected world. It is a world where the bloodlines of the past and the science of the future have come together to create something truly extraordinary. Those 18 boars didn't just survive in Scotland. They healed Scotland. The ancient Scottish forest is no longer locked. The heartbeat is back, and it sounds like the rhythmic snuffling and rooting of a wild boar in the undergrowth. The story of these 18 animals is a testament to the resilience of nature. It tells us that it's never too late to bring back a missing piece. After 7 centuries of silence, the forest is finally speaking again, and it has a lot to say about the power of life and the insane beauty of a restored ecosystem. For the DNA enthusiasts in our audience, this is the ultimate expression of information. The instructions for how to rebuild a forest were always there, encoded in the DNA of the trees and the epigenetics of the soil. All it needed was the activator, the boar DNA, to trigger the sequence. We have learned that genetic information doesn't just exist inside a cell. It exists in the interactions between species. When you put the boar back with the pine, the program runs perfectly. So, stay curious, stay wild, and keep exploring these big nature stories with us. The world is changing, and for once, in these highland woods, it is changing for the better, one rooted patch of soil at a time. The 18 boars of Scotland have shown us that the path to the future is often paved with the footprints of the past. The forest is infinite, and its story is just beginning again. This is what real conservation looks like. It's dirty, it's loud, it's complex, and it is absolutely insane. The Scottish transformation is alive, and it's moving through the trees right now. Tusks first into a brighter canopy. We are just witnesses to the great return.